So there have been many versions of Lara. Even within the same generation, the way she was depicted was often inconsistent. The generation I picked for this video is a good case in point. So why is it my favorite? Well, keep watching and you'll know. Hello fellow raiders, and welcome back to my humble abode. Last time we went back into the past, yet again, and I told you about my misfortunes with Tomb Raider 3. Now let's go right after that, and let's waffle about Lara's best version. You could think I hold this game in contempt because of my other videos, but actually I don't. I think they were all a rejuvenating experience, and I get it why every single one of those had their communities of fans. Thing is, I consider this generation to be some kind of generation 1.5, like a bridge from the PS1 to the PS2, although I'm a PC player, you know, but don't mind me. The last revelation made sure that we were no longer in the classic era and proposed one of the most coherent games ever done in the saga. Chronicles wasn't supposed to exist, but since the team at Core Design didn't really have a choice against the almighty Eidos Interactive, they managed to work something out, and indeed, wasn't that something? Anyway, the Angel of Darkness was the real project the people at Core Design had in mind, but instead of being a step into the next generation, it was more of a first glance. So take a step back, take my hand, no actually don't do that, and let's dive into generation 1.5, Lara's most inconsistent and yet best iteration. Let's do this. There's something I need to precise before we properly begin. These games are more or less intended to follow each other, so there should be a red line. The story and the characters are supposed to be the same people in every single iteration, but their relation with Lara is a bit weird, Van Croy being the best illustration for the record. Werner Van Croy is the most convenient character ever written in a video game. One day he's a mentor, next day he's a maniac. One day he wants to rule the world like some Dr. Strangelove, incompetence, and will do everything he can to stop his nemesis. Next day he's hiding like a mouse in his flat and begs for Lara's help. That didn't make sense to me, even as a 10-year-old. So what about Lara? How consistent can she be? Well, Lara Croft is the definition of pragmatism itself, so you could argue that the fact she was inconsistent in this generation actually adds a layer of imprevisibility to her character traits. This generation will let you catch a glimpse of the different aspects of her personality, and it didn't have to be consistent to be good, as long as it was making sense in the context of each game, especially in games going outside of usual Tomb Raider territory, like Chronicles and the Angel of Darkness for instance. Everything that Lara is can be found in these games. And I'm saying this because we shouldn't forget that the people at Core Design never expected there would be more games after that. This is essential to understand most of the game design decisions they took then. Save for the Angel of Darkness, they weren't really looking ahead, they were looking back for a sense of closure. Nothing more. And the decisions they took contributed to shaping Lara's identity as we know it. They brought nuance and depth to her character. Until Shadow of the Tomb Raider was released some years ago, there had been only 2 games featuring Lara as a teenager. This version of Lara was way more than just a Lolita version of Lara, as a critic wrote. Yeah, I'm serious. With budding breasts and all. Disgusting. This was a great decision on the dev's behalf, and I want to argue that the gameplay was a critical factor. Every single game before the last revelation had a level in which Lara didn't have any weapons. It was surprising in the first installment, but by the time Tomb Raider 3 came out, it was more like a trope. So they had to think about another way of making that kind of level surprising, without making it look too convenient. I think Lara's childhood was a good game design decision to renew the trope on the one hand, but also a means or an attempt to give Lara more substance.
Your average child's tea party. I feel we should lend this some respect.
Disrespect is a route to carelessness.
The last revelation has had quite a weird tutorial level, and looking back, it was the only one in that generation to have a compulsory one.
Fatality.
Like the game was teasing the player.
As a consequence,
like it was screaming. We know you know what a Tomb Raider game is, but you need to go through there to understand the story. And in Chronicles, I like the idea that the characters remembering Lara's adventures are like the metaphor for the all-powerful developers saying, this is a story and Lara is our character. We do what we want. By adopting that kind of game design mentality, they were able to not only transcend the generic identity of action-adventure games, they also brought Lara to challenge her own limits. She still had the boots, but she was more than just an adventurer. Lara faced a lot of trials in the past, and in spite of all the difficulties she had to overcome, she was indifferent, regardless how bonkers the situation got. It was just a regular Monday. There was very little for the player to see how she reacted to the events she was living. You could argue it was part of her personality, but I think you would be wrong. They simply didn't have the technical means to go too far into Lara's development. They had to focus on the game first. It was a small studio, remember? Tomb Raider 3 was probably the most abundant in terms of cutscenes.
You make plenty good flesh, pot.
You forget. I might be quite hungry myself. Famished, actually.
Being more numerous than ever before, they enabled the player to have an insight into Lara's personality. But yet again, they wouldn't go too far into uncharted territory. Got the joke? On the other hand, for the next generation, they decided to delve into the idea of cause and consequences for the first time. Lara's action eventually causing the end of the world in The Last Revelation. This was all the more conspicuous as the world was changing around you, the further progress you made into the game.
I am no bothered anyway.
Another example would be this guy. Now he's alive, now he's dead. Guess who's responsible? Naturally.
No.
The Angel of Darkness was indeed the pinnacle of that evolution. It created a grey zone in which Lara could escape the player for the sake of the story.
I can't remember. It's all a blur.
These narrative decisions were key to making Lara a morally grey character, something you don't really find in any other generation actually, if you know what I mean.
Boo!
The focus was progressively moving away from Lara to depict the world around her, the world of Tomb Raider. That tendency was seen in the addition of regular characters, for example. Like Lara Croft and Tomb Raider became two different things, and it notably shows in the Angel of Darkness, when the player is able to play as Curtis. Yeah, I know, the Angel of Darkness is technically called Lara Croft Tomb Raider, the Angel of Darkness. But this is just a marketing decision, and it doesn't mean anything in a game where you get to play as another character. This game design decision, regardless how controversial it was actually the next logical step in the evolution of Tomb Raider games. I was saying earlier that Lara Croft in that generation was probably the most inconsistent version of all generations. But if you look at the games, they too were inconsistent, although they're supposed to follow the same storyline. You could say that, from a distance, the first 3 installments are the same, but you can't say that about Generation 1.5. This is impossible. That's how original that generation was. Allowing Lara to evolve in that kind of grey areas was a good way to make her more than just an adventurer, which is good, and this is my final contention. Lara was no longer the game, she was in the game, just like you. It's a bit hard to explain, but don't worry, I think the result is more telling than the argument itself. Before The Last Revelation, Tomb Raider games were quite generic. They were plain action-adventure games with occasional platforms and shooting. Occasional, I said. Anyway, never forget the kind of criticism core design had to face at the time, that they were doing new with old, and as such The Last Revelation didn't do much to change the formula, since the engine was the same, but it took a step in the right direction and decided to refine the recipe. No, not that kind of recipe.
I'm afraid you've been misled.
For the first time in a Tomb Raider game, The Last Revelation presented the idea of a before and an after, from the origins of Lara Croft to her demise. Chronicles didn't change much as well, but it added a second ingredient. Because Chronicles was a compendium of Lara's adventures, they didn't have to think about the consistency of the gameplay, and could just focus on creating worlds to tell their stories. A bit like Tomb Raider 3, except Chronicles was a bit more disjointed, leaving even more room for inspiration. For the first time ever, and that's probably the best thing Chronicles brought to the saga, Tomb Raider was more than just action-adventure. It could be anything. Chronicles was the game in which ideas that were found in the other 4 games began to flourish. The Age of Darkness went a step further. For the first time, the story was writing the game and not the other way around. I know I'm not the biggest fan of this generation, but that was all the reasons why I think this generation is my favorite, in terms of how Lara was depicted. She was volatile, mysterious, independent, self-indulgent and yet merciless when necessary, like a mix between all the other versions. By the way, before the video ends, I feel the need to mention the other 3 generations. They all suffer from the same problem this generation had, Lara being inconsistent from one game to the next. But let's pretend there are only 4 versions of Lara, 1 per generation. Then I would say my second favorite is Lara from the Legend trilogy. For the third spot, I wouldn't know. I know the most recent version of Lara takes a lot of hate from classic players, and I am a classic player, but actually I like the idea of Lara having more depth, albeit at the price of being constantly disempowered and out of breath. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you want me to make other videos about the other 3 generations, why their versions of Lara are the best, just leave a comment below and tell me which is your favorite. I see what I can do. Thank you for watching, don't forget to leave an impression, a good one if you can. You may also share this video if you think it's necessary, and it will help me a lot actually, so please do so, and see you next time for a new episode. Oh, and remember, have fun.